Okay, open this public hearing. Topic is comprehensive plan and zone map amendment, Furlock Park Boulevard. Alan, and I'm going to turn it over to our city planner, Jacob Greichen.
Thank you. This is a quasi-judicial public land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a comprehensive plan map and zoning map amendment. The subject property is identified on the county assessor map as lot 600, map 4 North, 1 West, 8 AC. It is undeveloped, so there's no address. The applicant is Rocky Allen. The owner is Happy Heritage LLC. Because quasi-judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we must take a few moments to cover these matters and some required statements. So, does any member of the council wish to declare an ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias in this matter? I don't see any.
Hold on. Does it matter if I use the vet on the corner?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. That could be an ex parte contact as far as visiting the site, and as long as you disclose it. Okay. I don't think that will invalidate your vote. Unless someone from the audience wants to object to the ability of a counselor to make a fair decision. I don't see any. All right, good.
Now I see what you mean.
So generally the order of the proceedings will be as follows. Required statements, as I'm doing now, staff report, which I'll do shortly, the applicant's presentation, if they're here. Those in favor of the application, neutral. Those opposed, a rebuttal by the applicant if necessary. Final questions of the council, and then the record closes, and deliberations and decision may happen at the regular session after 7 o'clock today. So the following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to our code and Oregon Revised Statute 197.763, subsection 5. Following is a list of criteria for this decision, and those are St. Helens Municipal Code 17.08.040, sub A, sub 1 through 3. These are the quasi-judicial amendments and standards. All testimony arguments must be directed towards the applicable standards as described or other standards which someone believes apply. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions in this hearing in person in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond, precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue and action for damages in circuit court. So with that, why are we here today? As I said, this is a comprehensive plan map and zoning map amendment. So the first thing we like to do is, where in the world are we at? And in this case, we're very close to the intersection of US 30 and Furlock Park Boulevard. And as Council Carlson noted, it is adjacent to a property that has been a long time veterinary clinic. It's not that property, it's a vacant property between that one and then a single family dwelling. Kind of kitty quarter from the high school property, as you can see in that photo, and from the property that has the Dollar Tree and stuff on it, which is just north across Furlock Park Boulevard. So that's the property we're talking about today. It's a little over 2 acres, 2.18 to be exact. Generally flat. It does have some slope towards McNulty Creek, and you see how organic the property line is on the south side. That's because it follows the creek more or less. And there's, of course, some riparian area there, some flood hazard, floodplain area too. This is a matter that went to the Planning Commission. They did recommend approval of this proposal to the council. And I guess we should talk about what the proposal is then. Currently, the property is zoned R7, which is one of our moderate residential zonings. And they want to change that to highway commercial. In order to change it, we have to also change the comprehensive plan map. And that's why it's both the zoning and comprehensive plan map amendment. And Kathy, if you can go to the next slide.
So here's the zoning map. And to put it more simply, we want to change that property from yellow to pink. And in order to do that, we have all these wonderful technicalities we got to talk about. So one of those is our economic goals and policies. Back in 2008, it's been a while now, the city had adopted an economic opportunities analysis. And what that is just an analysis over our employment lands, our industrial and commercial lands. And that analysis showed that there was a shortage of commercial land in the city. This would add about 2 acres. Given some assumptions from the past, there may be only 1 developable acre because of the creek, but it does add a little bit of acreage of commercial, and so that's an easy box to check. Another one is residential. So the key question there is this going to be detrimental to the city's housing needs? And given the comprehensive plan designation that it has, it could only have a zoning of R7, R10. Of course, it's R7, as you can see there. These zoning districts are the least dense in the city, with the least amount of residential types possible, generally duplexes and single-family dwellings. You combine that with some of the environmental constraints that I talked about. We don't think it would lend itself very well to efficient residential use. And so really, then we're not shooting ourselves in the foot with regards to our housing needs for this proposal. So that's another box that we can check. Also, because it's vacant, there's not a house on there that we're going to make non-conforming, so if it burns, it has to go away. And so we're not harming any existing use either. So that's good. The next thing we got to look is at our highway commercial. And for this, what we want to do is look at the established pattern of our highway commercial and comprehensive plan map zoning. And so, Kathy, if you can go to the next map to show our comprehensive plan. This doesn't show the entire city, just a section of it. But if we look at the entire city, you have about 11,000 linear feet along the west side of US 30 between Millard Road to the north and Pittsburgh Road to the south. Pittsburgh Road to the north and Millard Road to the south. Yeah. I read that and like, that's not making sense. I just switched those around. So a pretty good stretch, and generally between that area, either the zoning or if it's not in city limits, it's the comprehensive plan designation, has a depth from the highway between 200 and 800 feet, except in a couple places. There's a stretch by Columbia Boulevard, which is about 150 feet wide, but it has some mixed use and commercial behind it. And the other place that it's narrow is right here. There's an average width of about 150, but there's a place that's as little as 85 feet. And as you can see, it really narrows down, and it's hard to see the little dots, but trust me, the dots on to the south and the east of the subject property are pink, which shows the highway commercial designation. And so it would make this area more consistent with the ribbon of highway commercial in the city. Another thing to think about is the fact that US 30 is a major arterial street and Furlock Park Boulevard is a collector street. So basically this is a significant intersection, and this property is very close to that intersection, and so that's another argument to where, oh God, it really makes sense as commercial. So in short, as far as our comprehensive plan, it looks good for commercial. We're not burdening our residential supply, and so everything looks good as far as those technicalities are concerned. Another technicality is the transportation planning rule. And what state law and ours says to comply with state laws, when we change zones, we have to examine whether or not it's going to compromise the facility. And clearly, highway commercial has uses which will result in more traffic than an R7 zone. And so that alone would say the applicant would have to submit a traffic analysis. But if we wind back to when I first started with the city, the first thing I did was sit in a room and rebuild the zoning data and the zoning map because things were very messy. And over the years, I believe I've weeded out all the little errors that have come up. The most recent one was actually this property. Because of some of the old maps were hard to read, we had that property listed as highway commercial as far as its comprehensive plan designation. The significance of that, and since then, we discovered the error and it was very clear that was wrong. I only discovered that in 2017. It wasn't discovered when we updated our transportation systems plan in 2009-10. And as part of that plan, you look at your lands, your designations, and you make some estimates. And so because those estimates were based on that error, we can look at this now and go, well, we already adopted that plan, so we don't have to do the analysis, which worked out because this applicant has never done this before, and it's very alien to them. So we're able to help them out with that. And what's great is we talked to ODOT, because they're the ones who kind of look over that, whether or not we're complying with that rule. And they said there was provisions to acknowledge mistakes. So that's good. So notwithstanding any opposition, which may make us go, and rethink some things, it seems like a pretty easy application to get behind. At the Planning Commission meeting, some of the neighbors did show up, and they weren't, vehemently opposed. They were interested in the potential impacts of their property, like if buffering and stuff like that would be required, which naturally anybody would. And we talked about some of the requirements that the commercial property built, if they built here, would have. And because the commercial use is a higher intensity than the residential, they would need to have buffering and screening and stuff like that to protect the sanctity of the residential properties to the west. And that's what we got. So, do you want to run the ship as far as inviting people up, or do you want me to? Go ahead. All right. So that means I don't know if anybody representing the applicant is here. I don't see any familiar faces, at least in regards to this application. All right, so the applicant's not here. The owner isn't here. So is there anybody who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is anybody even here because of this application? Oh, in person. Okay. Are you neutral, opposed? You're one of the neighbors. Yeah. Well, I think you're the only one here to talk, so come on up.
Just curious, are you neutral or opposed or in favor of?
Neutral, well, I wouldn't say I'm 100% opposed, but we do have concerns, myself and the neighbor, between the property and my property. So
Okay.
I'm not directly next to the property, but there is a section.
Could I just have you state your name for the record? I got to ask
okay.
that. Sorry. Not
My
to cut you
name's
off.
Lynn Henry, and I live at 3.
You don't have to. You don't have to say your address.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So part of the property in question does kind of wrap around and becomes right across the fence from my property. So myself and my neighbor, who's closest to the property, had the same concerns that were voiced in terms of buffering. There's a lot of trees. There's a lot of wildlife. There's a lot of things that are, pleasurable to our property. Part of the reason we bought there 3 years ago was the creek and the trees and the wildlife. And we had concerns about this property becoming commercial in terms of what might actually be built on that property and how it would affect our day-to-day living and the things that we enjoyed about the property that we had. And I think that's pretty much the, not necessarily objections, but concerns that we had. It may be more related to the hearings that follow in terms of what's actually going to be put on that property. But of course, if the zoning weren't changed, then that wouldn't become a concern. And that's pretty much what I had to say.
Just for the record, what would you consider to be suitable buffering? Do you understand buffering? I mean, this is just not specific to your site because I don't know which property
Right.
you're at. But if someone were to build a house or build a business next to my house, would I want a fence? Would I want trees? Because they have the right to do what they want in their own neighborhood, even if they're just building a garage. But it's like, would I rather have trees? Would I rather have fence and trees? It's like, are you concerned about just wildlife and nature, or are you concerned about what are you concerned about what they might do
We're
there?
concerned about the wildlife and nature, and we're also concerned about the noise from the highway. So the more trees, obviously, the more trees that come down. I mean, we already have fences. We have a fence, but you know, and the more trees come down, obviously, the more noise. It's going to change the noise factor from the highway, and depending on what's built there, there's also the increase in traffic, which might have some effect on that as well.
Just was curious
Mm-hmm.
because I like I said, that's my vet, so that's all I know of is the site from that side.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess since we have time, you know, you schedule these well in advance and try to guess, and sometimes you get it wrong. So the one thing to look out for is in our development code, it talks about prescriptive buffering and screening between, you know, what the code considers conflicting uses. But one thing you kind of want to look out for is, so there's the prescribed method, or there is an alternate method in the code. What the code says is the city can approve something different than the prescribed if it affords the same buffering and screening. And as an adjacent property owner, that's something you kind of want to look out for. So if you, and so some uses would be a permitted use, and you would just get notice of the decision. So you get this long, boring report, but you want to look at that landscaping section to see if it's following the prescribed or the alternative, and consider, you know, do you think that alternative is going to meet your needs? Then, or if it's a conditionally permitted use, it would require a public hearing, and so we'd have this kind of same song and dance. But the same thing would apply. It's either prescribed or the other route. So that's what you kind of want to look out for. If you don't know the code, you don't know necessarily what to look out for. So I just want to kind of plant that seed of knowledge in you.
I had another question for Jacob. If, no matter what goes forward, just general purposes for hearings or whatever, say I live adjacent to a property and I get a notice at my house, I can write a letter and send it to you prior to the hearing date, and it'd be the same as coming down here, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
A lot of times we'll get written testimony, and we'll include it in the report.
Okay, I just thought for purposes of access, because sometimes the hearings don't happen when it's convenient for people to come down, and then at least they know that their statement got read into the record and everybody gets to see it.
Yeah, we get everything from handwritten letters to emails to, you know, professionally written letters. I haven't got a video cassette before, but
Yet.
yeah.
I appreciate you explaining to her in depth on the buffer and how it could potentially be different than what to watch out for. So
Yeah, that's what I would want to know.
Yep.
So there's nobody else to talk about it. There's no applicant. The applicant, they stated that their hope is to put a car wash there. That's their dream. And, you know, they can't do that in a residential zone. So that's why they obtained it. This is one of those Valpiani properties. that's been under their ownership for a long time, which has finally been occupied or purchased by someone else.
Jacob, how would something like a car wash have an effect on the traffic patterns? And if it has any kind of negative effect, what could be done to alleviate any kind of negative effects that more traffic would facilitate?
Well, right now it's vacant property, which has a pretty low traffic generation. You know, grass doesn't result in many trees.
Picnics,
So,
right?
so it'll be night and day just because it's historically been undeveloped. But generally, you're looking at buffering, which is a certain area which has landscaping in it, and then screening for things like headlight glare. You know, I can't say there's not going to be new sights, sounds, and smells because right now it's idle property. And, you know, as residential, you could right now you could put a home or a duplex on it. If you wanted to do more than that, you would have to divide it. And so certainly there's a difference between a home or two and a car wash facility, which is going to have vehicles. And it depends when they operate, what time of day, and things like that.
Possibly you know where I'm going. We know that Gable Road and that intersection of Highway 30 and Gable Road is a nightmare. And there are right turn lanes and left turn lanes, and many times during commuter hours for high school kids are on the sidewalk area. In that area, there's a left turn, there's right turn. It gets that intersection gets clogged up by going into the Safeway or in south coming into the road access to McDonald's and the bank and all of that. Well, that's really bad. That's really a horrible intersection. Our transportation people weighed in on that and said they just shook their head and they don't quite know what to do with it other than to possibly make Gable Road a one-way in that area. And so I'm looking at that property, and I'm looking at the property adjacent to it north across from Furlock Park, which I believe there's a dollar store now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And behind that, it looks like it's vacant. It looks like it could be developed. And so my question is where would the driveway be or the access be to that property? And if that other property across Furlock Park is developed at some time, what kind of traffic patterns is that going to call for? I mean, it's like that's starting to add another tricky intersection close to Columbia River Highway. Not that I'm speaking. Hi.
We got to get it in when we can, right?
Okay. You go to the office and get a note, please, and we want to know where you've been. My concern is I'm not speaking against this at all. I'm just questioning, possible years from now what the effect could be or might be on that specific intersection of Furlock Park and Highway 30. I hope I'm clear.
No, yeah, you're clear, and it's a good thought, and it's something that I've talked with the applicant because they kind of picked my brain about the types of things that we're going to look at, and one of the things is depending on your proposal, they may need to do a traffic impact analysis, and certainly the Gable US 30 intersection would have to be examined to see if this proposal would impact, as well as the Furlock US 30 intersection. As a collector street, we do have rules about driveway approaches, and they were in some conversation with the veterinarian landowner, who I believe sold that property. They were talking about rebuilding a clinic there. And we kind of said, well, you can consider a shared access between the two. But that's something we'll look at as part of site development review. But the code does have spacing standards as well as rules for limiting the amount of driveway approaches, and having the driveway approach further from the residential uses may help minimize some of the impacts to people's quality of life. And certainly we would want to look at the property across the street, just to see if some driveway alignments make sense, if it's practical to do so.
And along with this, the effect of safe passage for pedestrians and especially high school kids who are in the area. What do we have for ideas for sidewalk area? Is that one of the conditions of improvement for that?
We've made that pretty clear. Yeah. Yeah, sidewalks is a very real possibility.
Will that link up with the highway sidewalk at that point?
Well, you have two properties there, and there's not a sidewalk in front of the veterinarian property. But the timing is good because my understanding is there's a potential buyer who wants to do something. Now, the county hasn't contacted us because that property is actually in the county, to have a meeting, and they haven't talked to us about something, but something's cooking. And if it's redeveloped, certainly we would get that sidewalk there. So if they're both redeveloped, and right now there's potential that they would be developed at approximately the same time, then we may have a sidewalk that indeed connects to the highway.
Great.
So the veterinarian is county owned?
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
For some reason, it's not in city limits. The comp plan map. So on this map, if it's a solid color, it's in city limits, and the little dots show that it's on our urban growth boundary, but in the county. So that shows you how weird city limits is in this area.
It is really weird.
So could a condition, was there any talk on the planning commission of this condition being hinging on the possibility of annexation as a condition?
Well, the property we're talking about specifically is in the city.
Okay.
Yeah, the one next door to it is not.
Okay.
Where the veterinarian is at. And they were about to actually file a consent to annex, but then they saw another property and decided to explore that one. So yeah, we actually had quite a bit of conversation with the owner and their representatives on design for that corner property.
Well, it seems to me that the timing is right to enter into those talks and see if they can go forward on that. That sounds like a good proposal. It really does.
For the new buyer, you mean?
Yeah.
Is that it for the hearing, Jacob?
Unless you want to talk more, that's all I got. Or if you have any more questions while the public hearing is open, now's the time. Or if you want to take a break.
Well, again, I want to come back to that area as being commercial and what that's going to do to the left turn coming out of Furlock Park going north. Ooh, that is nasty. That's a precarious intersection to go left there. It's just getting boggled. I really think it needs to be looked at in terms of effect, the long range effect that it's going to have.
So then the question would be, is do you want to adopt the finding for the transportation planning rule analysis, which is in the report, based on the error from the past, the mapping error? Or are you satisfied with the fact that we have rules that require such analysis for actual proposals?
I like that.
Okay.
I don't know how the rest of council feels, but I certainly like that, because we got to be thinking ahead on this. We can't be thinking about, okay, what's it going to look like right now? We know what it's going to look like right now. We've got to anticipate what's going on 10, 15, 20 years from now, because Highway 30 isn't getting any wider. And I don't think Furlock Park is going to be, road is getting any wider either. So we got to anticipate the loads on that and what's going to happen. It's that whole area is going to be more saturated with commercial, as I see it, in terms of, that's the pink area up there behind the dollar store.
Really limited in
Well,
access to.
Well, what I will say is that dollar store actually must be Skip Baker at the time. Actually, the city planner left a fairly good. There's a good between the yellow and the curb, and there's sidewalk
Yeah.
there, and then there's curb behind the vacant lot behind the dollar too. And there is one approach already has a cutout for it,
Yeah.
but left plenty of room there for on that side of the development. So,
And I think that
Kudos.
proposal, I remember looking at it, I think it predates Skip even.
oh really?
It was either Brian Lill or Howard Cutler.
Okay, so they really pushed it back quite a ways. Took a good chunk of property and pushed it. So
And Furlock is actually narrow as far as its right-of-way width. And one of the things that we look at with development is acquiring right-of-way to have the adequate width. As a collector street, we would need 60 feet of right-of-way, and I think, if I remember right, it's only 40.
Wow, yeah.
So that's at the very least, some street improvements would occur there along with development.
The cool thing about it being skinny is people don't go all weird and make 4 lanes. Because that is almost worse.
It does help with traffic calming, yeah.
It doesn't calm me.
It just go weird.
But when when the lanes are tight and forces everybody to be in a line, you don't have to worry about people making extra turn
Yeah.
places. It's one at a time, folks. So
Yeah, that's a good point. So if the mayor would like to close the hearing,
okay, this hearing's closed.